7 supersonic Onyx missiles shot out of Venezuela's coast. Each one 6 tons of steel, fuel, and explosive mass aimed straight at a U.S. destroyer and a cargo ship packed with $2.3 billion in goods. The Liberty Star's crew had 5 minutes to live, or to hide. But when the Arleigh Burke's Aegis radar lit up the sky, something happened that no one on that deck expected. What do you do when even a successful defense still feels like you lost? The radar room inside the USS Arleigh Burke turned from calm green to urgent red in a breath. 7 blips appeared out of the Venezuelan coast, each moving faster than anything a human eye could follow. 180 miles away, the Bastion launchers near Puerto Cabello had fired their payload, P-800 Onyx missiles, supersonic and deliberate. 28 feet long, 6,000 pounds each, and wrapped in radar-deflecting steel, those weapons were built to sink ships twice the Arleigh Burke's size. Their path arced low over the Caribbean, moving at Mach 2.6, nearly 1,900 miles per hour. The distance between warning and impact was the length of a coffee break. Inside the Combat Information Center, sailors shifted into a rhythm drilled through endless exercises. The Aegis Combat System lit up in fluid motion, intercept algorithms calculating while voices called out checklist items. Each missile track spread into 2, then 4, as radar reflections bounced across the sea surface. Operators tapped through layers of interference, filtering between civilian echoes and confirmed threats. Out the portholes, the gray morning looked calm, but every eye inside the room stayed locked on the glowing markers creeping closer. For the Liberty Star, the civilian cargo vessel trailing 6 miles behind, it wasn't routine. The bridge crew had no weapons, no radar strong enough to track an Onyx, and no idea how close they really were. Their ship carried over $100 million in machinery, fuel, and medicine bound for Panama. As they held position beside their naval escort, they realized they were inside the strike envelope, too far from shore to turn back, too slow to run. The international corridor they occupied wasn't empty. Over 400 ships used that same stretch each week, hauling nearly $2.5 billion worth of goods between continents. Oil tankers, grain haulers, container ships, all threading between invisible lines of risk. On that morning, their survival depended on radar screens and the precision of intercept algorithms measured in milliseconds. At Mach 2.6, the missiles would arrive in less than 5 minutes. The air itself distorted around their flight path. The Aegis system fed new data to launchers below deck. A split second later, SM-6 interceptors fired skyward, streaking away to meet them. Each shot cost several $million, but missing even once meant catastrophe. Technicians called out impact predictions as the intercept markers converged. Then, brilliant bursts appeared overhead. 5 quick flashes, silent to those below but recorded instantly on radar. 5 Onyx missiles exploded midair. Relief swept across the Arleigh Burke but settled unevenly. 2 blips remained. No cheers, no handshakes, only new coordinates flashing red. The system recalculated. Operators gripped their consoles tighter. The defense had worked, but only partly. The next few seconds would decide whether the mission stayed a narrow escape or turned into an international disaster already unfolding beneath the Caribbean sunrise. The sound barrier fractured again as the 2 surviving Onyx missiles tore through the sky toward the U.S. formation. Every console aboard the Arleigh Burke glowed with warnings. The intercept range had closed, the automatic solutions exhausted. One of the missiles began to drift off course, its guidance system losing alignment after the first anti-radar pulse hit. It spun south, nose dipping chaotically before vanishing into a column of foam. The impact threw a wall of water into the air so high it blotted the sun, and the shockwave reached the destroyer seconds later, shuddering through bulkheads like a hammer strike. The other missile didn't miss. It kept coming, dropping to sea-skimming altitude where radar return blended with background clutter. Against the algorithms, against the calm tone of control room voices, that one stayed locked. Crewmen on the deck caught a single flash, white, fast, and silent, and then the premature detonation burst less than a mile off the ship's bow. The explosion didn't pierce the hulls, but it filled the air with shrapnel and noise. Fragments screamed over the water, cutting across radio antennas and shredding communication lines. In that instant, motion sensors aboard Liberty Star erupted with warnings. The civilian crew felt the blast differently. The Liberty Star lurched on its axis, pitching cargo containers against their restraints until heavy steel twisted and snapped. The noise of snapping chains carried through the bridge louder than the thunder outside. Dozens of containers tumbled across the deck, crushing railings and spilling machinery worth millions. Diesel leaked from fractured pipes, creating a metallic sheen across the water. The chief engineer thought they'd taken a direct hit. He ordered power cut to the aft generators, unsure if they were burning. In the background, naval voices over encrypted channels stayed clipped and calm, calling damage reports and position checks. But across the open radio band, panic poured in. Merchant captains in the corridor shouted overlapping SOS signals. 20 ships shifted course within minutes, scattering from the impact zone and tightening traffic across a 100-mile span of ocean. Some claimed they'd seen a freighter sinking. Others believed another strike was incoming. Their radar screens were filled with metallic debris, each fragment reflecting like a target. Distress calls overlapped until networks jammed. Automated alarms echoed across nearby bridges, their electronic tones bouncing through storm clouds and diesel haze. When the smoke began to clear, only oil slicks and broken cargo boxes floated between the ships. 5 intercepts should have meant reassurance, yet the result was confusion, wreckage, and economic shock spreading through one of the busiest trade lanes in the hemisphere. Later analysis showed that fragments from the premature blast tore through multiple vessels, puncturing hull plates and disabling navigation radars. No ship sank, but the message was unmistakable. No shield could ever be complete. While crews were still securing decks and counting injuries, aircraft overhead were already sending live coordinates east, where strategists in Washington were preparing the next move. The United States didn't wait for confirmation from committees or statements from allies. Retaliation began before the debris from the failed missiles had settled into the Caribbean. From 20,000 feet above, a P-8 Poseidon reconnaissance aircraft swept over Venezuela's northern coast and captured the heat pattern of the Bastion launchers hidden beside the Puerto Cabello shipyards. Analysts fed those signatures directly into the Arleigh Burke's operations center. The coordinates matched earlier satellite views of storage bunkers lined with missile tubes worth millions each. Beneath those roofs worked hundreds of engineers and dock operators who thought their job was to rebuild warships, not guard weapons pointed at American convoys. The decision to strike was made in minutes. It was late morning when 3 FA-18E Super Hornets lifted from the carrier deck, each loaded with a pair of AGM-158 cruise missiles. At the same time, 5 Tomahawks left the tubes of the Arleigh Burke, climbing low and steady toward the coast. 11 missiles in total, representing roughly $60 million of precision ordnance, streaked south under a web of satellite correction and digital guidance. The mission profile demanded accuracy within 3 meters and no secondary blasts near civilian quarters. It was measured to remove capability, not to punish. Puerto Cabello's shipyard sprawled over almost 2 million square feet. Its cranes and dry docks lined a harbor where fishing trawlers drifted beside patrol boats. When the first missile struck, it hit the control building feeding power to the Bastion batteries. The next wave tore through the radar emplacements and workshops storing fuel cells. Within minutes, the complex collapsed into sections of burning steel. Drone footage later showed 4 main plants obliterated, 7 cranes disabled, and nearly 70% of the facility reduced to wreckage. The financial loss alone reached hundreds of millions, but the operational blow cut deeper. The country's only facility capable of assembling and servicing those missiles was gone. For dockhands and technicians on site, the episode came without warning. Some tried to evacuate through access roads now blocked by wreckage. Others scrambled toward the coast as storage tanks erupted. When the data was reviewed hours later, 120 casualties were confirmed, 32 of them fatal. While tragic, the strike left no surrounding neighborhood in flames and no naval personnel injured, proving how selective the engagement had been. Its effects still rippled beyond that coastline. Insurance firms raised premiums for any ship passing within 200 nautical miles of Venezuelan waters. Tankers altered routes, adding days and millions in new fuel cost. Regional exporters complained of lost shipping slots, and the government in Caracas faced condemnation from more than 20 capitals. The precision strike had locked open the Caribbean trade lane, but turned Venezuela's shoreline into an island of isolation, a tactical victory that deepened its political distance. The sea fell quiet again, yet every merchant log and every plotted course carried a reminder of the silence that follows a controlled shot. The convoy survived, yet the ocean seemed altered, not by wreckage or flames, but by the nearness of what nearly occurred. Precision strikes restored order, though for hours radio silence and drifting cargo marked the line between control and catastrophe. Every officer who watched those missiles vanish understood how narrow that line had become. The technology held, but just barely. Modern warfare no longer depends on who carries more firepower. It depends on how much uncertainty the world is willing to allow at sea. Each passing freighter now moves under that invisible tension, keeping commerce alive one decision at a time. In a world where seconds decide survival and silence masks conflict, staying informed is a kind of defense. Like, comment, and subscribe for more stories where the edge of war meets the open sea.